everyone, it's Lynda here from Banjo's Beat House with our weekly Facebook Live video. Yes, I am coming a little earlier than usual. We've just got a couple of things on this afternoon, so I thought I would sneak in at lunchtime. So I've had a couple of customer requests of late. One is around teeny tiny things, which I've got some in, so I can share with you guys some new products that went live on the website last night and will hit the floor probably tomorrow. And the other is a customer question on measuring bracelets. So I will start with the bracelet question and then we'll go into the new teeny tiny things. So I'm going to tip you guys down and we'll have some fun. So the question came in is, how do you measure, this is me testing magnets, how do you measure a bracelet to get the right fit? There's a couple of different ways. So, and it's also really important when you're doing things like a stretch bracelet to get the fit right. So how do we do that? So the traditional way is you grab a tape measure and you're just going to fit it over someone's wrist. Much easier to do it with someone than testing it on yourself. And also have it so I can actually read the centimeters would help. So if I am going to make something dead tight on my wrist, I know it's 20 centimeters. If I make it dead tight, it is going to sit very, very flat and it's not going to move. That's great if I'm doing something like working with a cymbal clasp where it's easy detachable, there is no safety chain, and I can just, and I know this one won't fit me because it was made smaller than my wrist, but you can see, you know, it's going to sit flat. So this fits mum absolutely perfectly. My wrist is bigger than mum's. So I would personally never do something that fit dead flat against my skin tight, because you swell up in the summer, you may, go change size a little bit. You want a little bit of room. Also, you don't know the coatings on the beads or how they're going to react necessarily with somebody's body oils, perfumes, things like that. So you want to have a little bit of room for wiggliness, let's just call it. So you can decide to go, okay, it's a dead fit, 20 centimeters. This clasp is, let me find the end of the rule, the tape measure. This clasp is about 2 centimeters. So that would take it to 22. So on my wrist, what does 22 look like? So at 22, we are there, which is about 2 fingers under my wrist. And now that's what I tend to do when I'm doing elastic bracelets. So if I had made the stitch component 20, allowing 2 centimeters for that magnet, it would actually fit me nice and comfortably, as you can see from the tape measure. Now that also works because these are very skinny flat seed beads. If you are working with, a chunky, and this is a 10 mil stone bead, you need to allow for the depth of those beads. So again, if I did that 20 centimeters to fit perfectly, I'm going to have exposed elastic because there's not enough beads because of the depth to go around my wrist. That's where, again, if you're measuring, you need to factor that in. So one of the ways we do that is to put a minimum of 2 fingers underneath and have wiggle room at that. If I'm doing something like a bigger bead, I might add another 0.5 centimeter to 1 centimeter whilst I'm laying up. Now that's, of course, if you don't have the person's wrist to test with. That's where these are really, really important things to know. If you've got the person's wrist to test with, great, try it on before you tie off your elastic, before you finish something. But if you don't, this is a really helpful guide. So as I said, I've allowed 2 fingers, or it's about 2 centimeters, or if you're playing flat to the wrist, if you get somebody to measure their wrist, and this is what customers will ordinarily do, I'm measuring here and it's 19 centimeters. If I move it up there, we're getting to that 20 centimeters mark. So you also don't know where somebody is blind measuring on their wrist. So you do want to allow for that, particularly if you're doing a wider piece versus a skinny piece. So they're things you need to factor in, particularly around a wrist. Again, different style clasps, you can get a little bit of wiggle room. So in this, which is flat chenille, and we've just done a sliding clasp, if I needed a little bit more wiggle room, I could add in more jump rings once the piece is already finished, or come back and add another row. That would give me a little bit of length. Short of that, change out your magnet configuration. Instead of this one, go to a flat magnet, which is a wider one. That would buy you a bit more space. So there's little things you can do, but where you've stitched in your magnet, that's where it's really important to get your fit right. So that's the difference of something like, these guys that are symbol range, they're stitched in, so once your length is done, it's done. So it's really important with these to get your length right, but you at least have the flexibility that they are small beads, so you don't have to have it up as much from the wrist, but you do need to take that into account. Something like this where you've got jump rings and things like that, you could, stitch in another loop of beads here, add another loop of beads in, add a couple more jump rings, do things like that, change up the size of the magnet. You also need to factor in when you're working with, we put these safety chains on or extension chains so that if the magnet comes apart, the bracelet doesn't get lost. You also need to factor that in, that if the hand is, quite wide like mine are, can somebody roll that on comfortably? And this one I can because it's a 70mm one, but I know that I can only just, if I can, yeah. I can't even get that close, so the clasp is in the way, and even then it would be pulling on that. So that's the difference where length is really, really important. So this is obviously, just sitting here, I can't get any further back on my wrist. So you need to factor in where on the wrist you want it to sit. The width of the hand might dictate the type of clasp arrangement you use. So they're all the things that I look at when I am measuring for length. So take into account the wrist, take into account the clasp before you even finish your project, so that you know the lengthening that you kind of need. And I hope that helps answer the question. You often can get designs where, you want to finish it nicely in one spot and then, it's not quite going to work. That's where you can have fun with different clasps to get you that little bit more length you need in the piece. So I know one customer had a challenge with the paw print to get the right length. The paw print was going to be cut in half. So instead we put an extension chain on with a lobster clasp, and that allowed for the extra length. So that's the get out of free jail solution, is lobster with extension clasp, and that's why extension chains, which are these sorts of things. That's why these guys are great. So you can just do a one size, and you can pick up an extra 5 or 7 centimeters depending on the length of chain, to help get you out of that jam. So they're all things to take into consideration. So sometimes it's about bead depth, sometimes it's about a chain, can you get it over the hand, and where is it going to sit on the wrist. As a guide, I tend to make my stuff somewhere, if I'm stitching, somewhere around the 19 centimeter mark, and I know that's going to fit mum basically with most of my clasps. For me, I'm around the 21 to 22 centimeter mark, so it is going to vary depending on who you're working with. So yeah, it's things to take into consideration. And if you can, test it on the person before you finish it, or try and do the wrist measurement yourself. If not, if you are doing it as a commission piece, take a photo of your own wrist, or borrow a hand model and specify where you need that measured, and show photos of how you need it measured to help you get a true guide. Now in that instance, I would just do it as a tight fit, and then allow for a centimeter or two for that wiggle room. That would be my approach, and hopefully mum will pick up that phone. So tiny little things. We've been asked for tiny little beads. So these guys are 1.5 by 2mm tiny faceted rondelles. So they're joining our tiny little 2mm rounds. The crystal and I think the jet are back in stock this week. So this is red opaque, in the 1.5 by 2. I also now have it in stock in the bright yellow opaque. So there's a whole little pile of these off to the side of my desk. We have clear crystal. We have some shiny sparkly jets. We've got lovely transparent teal, because that's the color I was specifically asked for. And I've got some opaque dark blue as well. And I think there is some white. So yeah, these guys are now up on the website. As I said, they'll probably be in the shop tomorrow by the time we get them finished tying, and their barcodes on them. But yeah, we are always happy to work with you guys to get different types of beads that suit your project requirements. And I know a lot of people are now coming at me for tiny things, which is fun, and seeing then what you're working with them on in hand sewing projects is always fun. So yeah, if there is a shape or a style or a color or a particular size you're after and you can't find it on the catalog of the website that we already have built, just reach out as always, and we will see what we can do. So yeah, it's always fun working with you guys to bring in fun little tiny things, or big things as it may be. But that is it for me for this week. We do have our first round of Champagne Forever with Paula on Friday, so I'm looking forward to, on Sunday. So I'm looking forward to that class coming up and sharing with you guys my work in progress with that. Following the soutache class with Meg earlier in May, I do have some soutache cord and some stiffened felt in transit at the moment, so I'm looking forward to getting that up and experimenting with the felt with you guys on some things I've got in mind as an alternative potentially to working with stiff stuff for seed bead embroidery work, as well as, you know, doing it with soutache stuff. So lots of fun things on the horizon. Keep an eye on your mailboxes on Sunday. We'll have our mid-month newsletter with the July box project in there, as well as we start opening up pre-orders for that one. Yeah, I'm kind of loving this project. I love the versatility of this one, and it is another design your own adventure. So yeah, looking forward to sharing with that one with you guys soon. But that's it. I will see you next Friday. Bye for now.